1. God does not ignore your wounds. He uses pain as a means to reveal his justice, not merely as a response to wrongs, but as a deeper invitation into his purposes. 2. God's handling of those who hurt us is neither swift revenge nor passive tolerance. It is a mysterious blend of mercy and measured judgment that escapes human logic. 3. While we are obsessed with the act of harm, God is more concerned with the heart behind it, and his response is designed to transform both the offender and the wounded. The act of judgment is sacred. It belongs to God alone, not because he forgets justice, but because his justice is perfect and untainted by bitterness. 4. God's first concern is not punishing your enemies, but healing your soul, so you are not chained to the one who hurt you. 5. Often God's punishment is not destruction but correction. God aims to redeem both victim and violator, and that is a justice far higher than our own. Let me begin with a question we have all whispered in the dark, not just walk away, but sometimes flourish, unpunished, unrepentant, and untouched. You felt it. We all have the betrayal, the slander, the abandonment, the abuse, and worst of all, the silence from above. This is not a speech for the unscathed. This is for the bruised, hearted who wonder if God has forgotten their pain. If that's you, then you must listen to the very end, because what God does to those who hurt you is not always what you expect, but it is always exactly what you need. It is natural to want justice. Even small children cry, "That's not fair," before they know what fairness is. When we are wronged, something in us ignites, a longing for wrong to be righted, but God does not rush, and this is the first great offense to our sense of justice. God moves slowly, but slowness is not forgetfulness, it is deliberation, and in that delay, something deeper is happening. If we had divine power, we'd smite. We'd correct every lie, silence every slanderer, and expose every hypocrite. But God is not like us. He does not merely act out of anger. He acts out of eternity. Those who hurt you are not outside his reach. They are under his gaze. But his gaze does not burn immediately. It searches, it convicts, it draws, and if unheeded, it judges. There is comfort in this truth. They will face him, if not in this life, then in the one that cannot be escaped. You do not have to carry the burden of revenge, because God's justice is not delayed, it is stored. He is not unjust to forget what was done to you, but he is wise enough to deal with it in a way that does not make you a prisoner of hatred. When someone harms you, there is a hidden temptation to let that injury become your identity, but God's dealings with them are not your healing. Your restoration is already underway, even while theirs may just be beginning. God's priority is your freedom, not their punishment. The reason God says, "Vengeance is mine," is because vengeance in human hands becomes poison, but in God's hands it becomes a tool for redemption or final justice, and sometimes what feels like mercy is a greater punishment because it forces the offender to confront themselves. So how does God deal with those who hurt you? Sometimes he exposes them, sometimes he humbles them, sometimes he redeems them, and in the rarest of all mercies, he may even reconcile them to you, but always, he acts justly. You may never see it in the form you expect, but you will see it in the form that frees you. You can let go, because the one who sees in secret will reward openly, not just with justice for them, but with peace for you. There is a kind of suffering that slips past the body and goes straight for the soul. It does not bleed, but it burns. It is the pain of betrayal, rejection, dishonor, the wounds inflicted not by circumstance, but by people, the kind of pain that makes you question not just your worth, but God's attention. It raises a silent cry that rarely gets voiced out loud. "Lord, do you see what they've done to me?" The answer is not only that he sees, but that he acts, just not in the way we often want, and never in the moment we expect. God's justice does not leap like lightning. It grows like a tree, slowly, surely, silently, and pain, yes, pain is often the soil where that justice begins to grow. When someone wrongs us, the most human response is to want to see them pay, and not just pay, but hurt, in a way that mirrors our own pain. The human heart wants mirrored justice, swift and symmetrical. They broke me, so they must be broken. They shamed me, so they must be shamed. But that is not the path God chooses. His justice is not petty. It is not a reflection of our wounds, but a revelation of his character. This is why pain becomes something holy when surrendered to him, because pain, rather than being just a consequence of injustice, becomes the very entry point for divine action. It is through pain that God leads us away from vengeance and into a higher courtroom, a place where we are no longer the prosecutor, and he is not merely the judge, but the redeemer of both our story and even sometimes our enemies. But this doesn't mean God is indifferent, quite the opposite. The slowness of his justice is not forgetfulness, it is restraint, and restraint is often the first sign of true power. If God were like us, he would lash out. Instead, he leans in. He searches the heart of the offender, not to ignore the crime, but to determine the full truth of what must be done. His justice is never transactional, it is transformational. There is a story behind every person who wounds you, and God knows it. He sees what twisted the soul before the soul twisted the knife. That does not excuse them, it explains them. And while we judge based on what was done to us, God judges based on what was done to both of us. His justice is never blind, it is never biased, it is always holy, and so pain becomes a threshold, a place where you can either collapse into bitterness or walk forward into trust. God does not force this journey. He waits for you to hand over the right to strike back, not because he wants you powerless, but because only he can carry the weight of judgment without becoming evil himself. This surrender is not passive, it is powerful. You are not letting the offender get away with it. You are handing them over to the only one who knows exactly what they did, exactly why they did it, and exactly what it will take to make it right. That may mean conviction, it may mean discipline, it may even mean restoration, but it will always mean justice, God's justice, not yours. Some of the most transformative moves of God begin in the place of deepest hurt. If your pain could talk, it would tell you this: do not waste me, because your pain is not pointless, it is prophetic. It is a summons from heaven to trust what you cannot yet see. It is the voice that says, I will repay, even when repayment seems absent, and in time that promise is never broken. You may not see the outcome, you may not watch the scales balance in your lifetime, but your story will not be unfinished, and your injury will not be unavenged, because God, in his own way, in his own time, does make all things right. He does not discard your pain, he does not overlook your tears, he collects them, counts them, and in a world where human justice is often flawed, it is a sacred relief to know that divine justice is not only certain, it is eternal, and so your pain, if given to God, becomes more than a wound. It becomes a witness that God is not only aware of what was done to you, but deeply involved in what will become of it. The door of justice opens slowly, but once it does, it cannot be shut by any man. Pain, then, is not just something to survive. It is something through which God moves. It is not the end of your story. It is where heaven begins to write his ending. When someone wounds us deeply, our first instinct is often not to forgive, but to see them brought low. We imagine justice as a kind of mirror. What they did to us returned to them in equal measure. We do not merely want fairness, we want a reckoning that feels personal, and in that hidden place of the soul, vengeance begins to disguise itself as righteousness. But God's dealings with those who hurt us are not that simple. His response is not like ours, because his heart is not fractured by the same wounds. He does not react out of pride or pain. He acts from a place of eternal knowledge. And this is where many struggle to trust him, because the way he handles the people who wounded us often seems too kind, too patient, too restrained. We look for thunder, but he gives them time. We look for exposure, but he offers them grace, and if we're honest, that grace offends us. We think, how could God show mercy to someone who inflicted harm on me? What we forget is that mercy and vengeance are not opposites in God's economy. They are tools in the hands of a master who sees the end from the beginning. Sometimes his mercy is the greater judgment, and sometimes his vengeance is a deeper form of mercy. This tension between what they deserve and what God allows is the mystery. It's where we must walk not by sight, but by trust, because often God's justice does not show itself immediately, and his mercy may look like injustice to us. But heaven has a timeline of its own, and its clock is never late. In the human heart, vengeance feels like justice. It feels like closure, but it is deceptive. What it actually delivers is a cycle. It ties you to the offender, binds you to the moment of injury, and forces you to relive it with every act of imagined payback. God's mercy, on the other hand, feels unjust, but it sets you free. It removes you from the courtroom and seats you in the sanctuary, and yet we often resent it when God extends mercy to those who hurt us. Why? Because we want them to pay, here, now, publicly. But the truth is, no one ever escapes God, not those who are wicked, not those who repent, not even us. Everyone will give an account. The difference is in how God chooses to deal with that account. Some he humbles, some he corrects, some he allows to taste the emptiness of their own actions until they are sickened by the very sins they once wielded, and some he brings to judgment more quietly, where their downfall is internal, invisible to all but him. This is the part we often miss. God's vengeance does not always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like a soul being slowly undone by its own choices. Sometimes it looks like shame in the night, or a gnawing in the conscience that cannot be shaken, and sometimes, uncomfortably for us, it looks like transformation, because the same God who listens to the cries of the wounded also whispers to the hearts of the wicked, and sometimes he redeems them. This is not injustice, it is miracle. It is what happened with Saul of Tarsus, who persecuted the early church and was yet called by God to become the Apostle Paul. To the victims of Saul's violence, that must have seemed like the greatest injustice of all. Yet through Paul, God healed thousands. You see, divine justice doesn't simply ask, what should they suffer? It asks, what can they become? And that question is not weakness, it is glory. But for those who remain unrepentant, who persist in hurting others without remorse, God's vengeance is not forgotten, it is stored, and when he acts, it will be perfect. Not one stroke too many, not one moment too late. But we must understand that God is not like us. He does not need to make a show of justice to satisfy pride. His judgment is silent, but it is total, and when he closes the door, no one can open it again. So then, what are we to do with this mystery? We must let go. We must choose to trust that the one who balances mercy and vengeance holds all truth in his hands, that he sees not just what was done, but why, and that his response will be shaped by wisdom, not wrath. You may not get the apology, you may never witness the consequences, but justice has never needed your eyes to be real. God is dealing with them, even if he's doing it in the dark, and in time, whether by mercy or by judgment, he will make all things right. Let that be enough when we are wounded by another person, whether through betrayal, abandonment, cruelty, or deception. Our vision narrows, we become consumed by the moment of injury, we replay it in our minds like a scene on a loop. The offense becomes everything. It defines the person who hurt us, it defines the moment, and sometimes, if we are not careful, it begins to define us. But God does not look as we look. He does not see only the action, he sees the heart behind the action. He sees the hidden story, the root before the fruit, the wound beneath the weapon, the lie behind the behavior. He sees beyond the offense, This does not mean he excuses it. To see clearly is not to ignore what is evil, but God's vision stretches farther than ours. While we are transfixed by the harm done, he is occupied with the souls involved. He is not only interested in justice as a correction to behavior, he is interested in transformation as a restoration of the heart. This is the scandal and the holiness of divine justice. It goes deeper than we are willing to go. We want retribution. He wants redemption. The person who hurt you may have done something truly terrible. There is no need to downplay it, spiritualize it, or wrap it in soft language. What was wrong was wrong. God is not asking you to call it good. He is simply asking you to release your grip on the gavel, because he sees the full picture. You don't. He knows where their cruelty came from. He knows what shaped their decisions, what formed their conscience, what voices they listened to in the silence. He knows whether they acted out of willful pride or broken blindness. He knows if they were hardened by years of being harmed themselves, or if they have simply chosen evil over and over again until it became their nature. You may only see the tip of the iceberg. He sees the whole of the ocean, and so his judgment is not just reactionary, it is surgical. He does not destroy out of rage, he disciplines out of righteousness. The goal is not always to crush the offender. It is often to convict them, to confront them with their own heart, and to offer them a door they may or may not choose to walk through. This is why you may not always see the kind of justice you expect, because God's version does not only aim to correct the act, but to transform the actor, and that is a far more difficult work. Anyone can be punished, few are changed, but God, who sees beyond the offense, wants change more than punishment, because punishment without change leaves the soul lost. This can be frustrating for us, especially when we don't see change at all. It feels like God is doing nothing, like he's allowing evil to go unchecked. But what we forget is that God often works where we cannot see. He moves in ways that are invisible to us. The offender may appear to thrive. They may carry on without visible consequence, but you are not looking through the lens God sees through. You are looking from the outside, not the inside, and God deals with the inside. Even more than that, God is always doing two things at once. He is working on them, and he is working on you. While you're watching their life unfold, God is watching your heart grow. Will you trust him to handle it, or will you demand control? Will you allow his vision to prevail, or will you insist that justice only counts if it matches your definition? There is no comfort in trusting your own limited vision, but there is great peace in trusting the one who sees the beginning and the end. He knows the full weight of what was done to you, and he knows exactly what kind of justice will make it right, both in heaven's courts and in your soul. Sometimes that justice will come as correction, sometimes as exposure, sometimes in God's mercy as a transformation so deep it leads the offender to repentance and even to reconciliation. That kind of outcome may feel like a loss to the part of you still craving revenge, but to the part of you seeking peace, it is the highest kind of healing. So trust this: nothing escapes God's sight. Not the act, not the intent, not the consequence, and certainly not your pain. He sees beyond all of it. He is not just looking at what happened. He's looking at what he can do with it. And in his hands, even the worst offenses can become the start of something holy, something redemptive, something eternal. Let God see more than you can, and let him act from that vision. There is a certain ache that grows heavier with time, the ache of unanswered pain. You watch as days turn into weeks, and weeks into years, and still the one who hurt you walks free. They smile, succeed, build lives, raise families, and sleep peacefully, while you remain tangled in the memory of what they did. You wonder, where is God in this? You look for the fire of justice, and instead you find silence. But heaven's silence does not mean heaven is absent. What feels like delay is not denial. It is preparation. God's justice is not like ours. We are creatures of immediacy. We want resolution now. We want to see the balance restored. While the wound is still fresh, but God is not hurried. He is eternal, and in that eternal wisdom, He chooses timing not to suit our emotions, but to fulfill His purpose. Divine justice is not driven by our sense of urgency. It is anchored in His understanding of the heart. The waiting is not punishment, it is invitation. In that space between the wound and the reckoning, something sacred can happen, if we let it. That space is where God refines the soul of the wounded and gives the offender time to face their own reflection. You see, God does not just punish evil, He confronts it. He offers a window of grace, because true justice is not simply about retribution. It is about restoration, where possible, and ultimate reckoning, where necessary. God is patient, but His patience is not passive. Every day that passes without visible consequence is not a day without divine action. It may be hidden, but it is not absent. He may be softening a heart, turning up the volume on a buried conscience, or arranging circumstances that will eventually bring truth into the light. Often, the hand of God is working beneath the surface, while we are demanding thunder from the sky. But God's justice grows in silence the way seeds grow in soil. Unseen at first, then unstoppable in time. For those who wait for justice, this process can feel cruel. We confuse God's patience with neglect. But to the God who sees all ends, delay is never neglect. It is precision. He waits, not because He doesn't care, but because He cares too much to act prematurely. His justice is not only about punishing the wicked, it is about healing the wounded, and if justice came at your pace, it would likely serve your anger, not your freedom. What God offers is deeper. He wants to free you not only from the memory of what was done, but from the desire to see someone else suffer for it. That is a higher justice, one that cannot be reached without patience. Patience that believes that God sees, that He knows, and that He will move. Not a moment too late, not a moment too early. And for the one who did the wounding, God's patience is both mercy and warning. It is mercy because it gives them time to repent. It is warning because that time will not last forever. The door of grace is open, but it will not always remain so. When God closes that door, it is final. His judgment may not begin in fire, but it ends in fire total, complete, righteous. For those watching, it is hard to wait for that moment. We want signs. We want to know that God is doing something. But faith is not about having signs. It's about trusting the one who sees more than we do. It's about believing that justice delayed is still justice guaranteed. It's about understanding that the same God who says, "Vengeance is mine," also says, "Be still and know that I am God." In the end, the patience of divine justice is not weakness. It is power under control. It is the deliberate restraint of a holy God who knows exactly what He's doing, and when He moves, whether in mercy or in judgment, it will be complete. The offender will not escape. They may run, they may hide, they may convince the world of their innocence, but they will not elude the God who sees in secret and acts in perfect timing. So if you are in the waiting, do not lose heart. God's delay is not indifference. It is design. He is shaping something in you, and He is setting the stage for something in them. The clock of heaven does not tick like ours, but it never misses a moment. And when the time is full, His justice will come, not just to correct the wrong, but to redeem the story, and it will be enough. Pain has a way of making everything feel smaller. Your world, your hope, your sense of self. When someone wounds you, it doesn't just cause a momentary sting. It lodges itself deep in your identity. It can make you believe that you are defined by what they did rather than who you are. But God does not let pain have the final word. What was meant to harm you, He uses to shape you, not to destroy you, but to form something stronger, deeper, more eternal in you than you ever thought possible. There is a refining power in suffering, not because pain itself is holy, but because in God's hands, even the ugliest wounds can become holy tools. When someone wrongs you, you stand at a crossroads. You can become bitter, cynical, and vengeful, or you can become softer, wiser, and more deeply anchored in truth. That choice doesn't come naturally, it's not easy, but it's where the work of God begins. The people who hurt you do not get to define your destiny. They may have had power for a moment, but they are not the author of your story. God is, and he takes even the most unjust chapters and turns them into part of a greater arc, one that bends toward redemption. What they meant for evil, God can repurpose for your good, but that good is rarely immediate, and it almost never comes in the form we expect. We think good means vindication. We think it means reversal, but often the good God works in us is internal. Before it is external, he stretches our capacity for mercy. He deepens our understanding of grace. He breaks our dependence on the approval of others. He exposes our hidden pride. He teaches us to pray not from a place of performance, but from a place of desperation. These are not small things. They are soul-defining. The wound may not have come from God, but he refuses to waste it. He uses it as a chisel, carving away the pieces of you that cannot carry the weight of your calling. That is not cruelty. That is craftsmanship. A sculptor never begins with something that's already finished. He begins with something that needs to be shaped, and shaping often looks like breaking, until you see what's being made. When God allows someone to hurt you and doesn't immediately intervene, it can feel like betrayal, but he is not absent. He is near, closer than the pain itself. He does not waste a single tear, nor does he ignore your cry for justice, but he knows that what is done to you is not nearly as important as what he can do in you through it. That doesn't excuse the offender, but it does elevate your healing to something eternal. Many people live their whole lives enslaved to what others have done to them. They carry the offense like a badge. It becomes the filter through which they view all of life. But God invites you to lay it down, not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters too much to be left in human hands. He asks you to entrust it to him so he can do something you never could, bring transformation out of trauma. And here's the mystery. Sometimes the very thing that was meant to destroy you becomes the foundation of your strength. You love more deeply because you've known what it means to be unloved. You extend more mercy because you've received less. You become a protector of others because you know what it feels like to be exposed. That kind of person is not weak. That kind of person is a weapon in the hands of God. So don't mistake the pain for the end of your story. It is not your tomb, it is your womb. Something is being born in you that could not be formed any other way. Your softness is not weakness, it is the softness of a heart that has passed through fire and remained open. Your faith is not naive, it is faith that has wrestled, doubted, wept, and still chosen to believe. God does not break you just to see you broken. He breaks you open so that something greater can be built inside you. Every wound can become a window, every scar can become a seal of where God met you, and every trial can become a testimony, not of what someone did, but of what God did in response. The hands that allowed the hurt are the same hands that now hold your healing. Trust them. You are not being buried, you are being planted, and in time what grows will be something one not even the ones who hurt you can take credit for, only God. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood commands in all of Scripture. For many, it sounds like surrendering to injustice. It sounds like excusing evil, pretending something didn't happen, or letting someone walk away without consequences. But that is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the wrong that was done. It is about refusing to let that wrong rule your life. When God calls you to forgive those who hurt you, He is not asking you to erase the memory. He is asking you to release the control it has over you. There is a difference. To forgive is not to say, "It didn't matter." It is to say, "It matters so much, I will not let it define me anymore." Forgiveness is not weakness. It is a fierce act of spiritual defiance. It declares, "You hurt me, but you do not get to shape who I become." Many believe that forgiveness means immediate trust or reconciliation, but forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Forgiveness is given. Trust is rebuilt. Reconciliation takes two people in agreement, but forgiveness takes one person in surrender. You can forgive someone who never says sorry. You can forgive someone who continues to justify what they did. Forgiveness does not wait on their repentance. It responds to God's command and His example. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It is a decision, a repeated one. Some wounds are so deep, you will have to choose forgiveness again and again, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly. And that does not mean you're failing. It means you're healing, because healing is rarely immediate. It's more often a slow letting go of bitterness, a deliberate turning away from vengeance, and a decision to release the offender into the hands of God. This is where real freedom lies. As long as you hold on to the desire to make them pay, you remain chained to the moment of injury. You are not free because you are still looking backward. Forgiveness breaks that chain. It says, I no longer need to see them suffer to move forward. It places justice in the hands of the only one who can deliver it without corruption. Does that mean God won't deal with what they did? Absolutely not. He sees all, knows all, and keeps perfect records. But God's justice and your bitterness are not meant to exist side by side. One will always silence the other. Forgiveness is not letting them off the hook. It's taking them off your hook and placing them on God's, and that hook is far more secure. When you hold onto unforgiveness, you don't protect yourself. You poison yourself. You rehearse the wound, relive the pain, and reinforce the lie that you are forever marked by what they did. But when you forgive, you allow God to rewrite the narrative. You declare that you are not a victim of their sin, but a witness to God's redemption. You don't have to forget what happened. In fact, you shouldn't. Some wounds need to be remembered so that wisdom can grow, so that discernment can be sharpened, so that others can be protected. But you remember differently. You no longer remember with rage or shame. You remember with clarity, peace, and perhaps even purpose. God never asks you to pretend. He does not minimize your pain. He meets you in it. And from that place, He invites you to walk a higher road, not because the offender deserves it, but because you do. You deserve to be free, free from carrying what they did, free from spending your strength on hatred, free to love again, hope again, breathe again. That is what forgiveness offers. The cross is the ultimate picture of this. Jesus did not forgive because His offenders were worthy. He forgave because His Father was worthy of obedience, worthy of trust, worthy of letting go of what justice in human hands could never truly fulfill. And so He let it go, not because it didn't hurt, but because holding it would have kept Him from His purpose. You are not being asked to feel okay about what happened. You are being invited to rise above it, not in denial, but in power, because forgiveness does not make you a doormat. It makes you a warrior, a person who refuses to be ruled by what someone else did, a person who walks in the authority of grace, a person who believes God will handle what they cannot. This is the call, not to forget, but to forgive, not to erase, but to entrust, not to excuse, but to exit the prison of resentment. That is where your freedom lies, not in watching them pay, but in choosing to let go. And when you do, you'll find something surprising. Forgiveness wasn't just about them. It was always about you, your healing, your future, your peace, and no one, not even the one who hurt you, can take that away. There is something within us that longs to see justice play out before our eyes. When someone causes deep harm, wounds our spirit, betrays our trust, or tarnishes our name, we want consequences to be visible. We want the world to know what they did. We want to hear apologies, witness humiliation, and see restitution. It feels only right that the pain they caused should somehow return to them, clearly, publicly, undeniably. And when that doesn't happen, when they seem to flourish or remain untouched by any consequence, it can feel as though God has turned a blind eye, but He hasn't. God's judgment is not always public, but it is never absent, and it is never imprecise. What you don't see on the surface doesn't mean nothing is happening beneath it. We tend to measure judgment by outward failure, financial collapse, ruined reputation, exposed sin. But God doesn't measure justice in terms of drama. He measures it in terms of truth, and truth never loses its way to the surface. It just takes the path God appoints. Sometimes God's judgment begins in secret because That is where the sin began. It may start with a sleepless conscience. It may begin with anxiety that won't quiet, or the slow unraveling of relationships that once came easy. God often begins judgment not with thunder, but with conviction, not with lightning, but with the quiet weight of being found out by your own soul. This is not God being lenient. It is him being surgical, because his aim is not merely to punish, but to pierce. And what pierces most deeply is not shame in front of others. It's the sharp realization that you cannot outrun what you've done, even when no one else sees it. This is also part of God's mercy. Judgment, in its earliest form, often looks like an opportunity to repent. God may withhold public exposure to give space for private confession. But when confession doesn't come, the covering will eventually be stripped away. What is whispered in secret will be shouted from the rooftops, not because God is eager to humiliate, but because he will not allow injustice to go unaddressed. He is slow to anger, but he is not slow to act. He moves with precision, and when he moves, nothing escapes his gaze. The one who hurt you may be thriving in the eyes of the world. They may be celebrated, promoted, even admired, but external success is not divine approval. Do not mistake temporary applause for lasting peace. You can build a life with poisoned bricks and still make it look beautiful for a time, but the structure won't stand. God sees the foundation, he sees the cracks, and he knows exactly when and how it will fall. There's also another kind of judgment that happens, one that isn't as easy to spot, but just as devastating. Sometimes God allows people to succeed without him. That is judgment in disguise. He lets them build kingdoms on sand, and in doing so, exposes how empty success becomes when it lacks substance. He gives them what they want, and then reveals that what they wanted can't hold the weight of a soul. It's a silent unraveling. No scandal, no exposure, just an internal collapse masked by external gain. And that collapse is far more haunting than any courtroom sentence. You see, God doesn't settle for surface-level correction. He deals with root systems. He digs underneath the facade and touches the motives, the pride, the secret idolatry. That is why his judgment may not look like the punishment we imagined, but it is always exact. You may never witness it. You may never get the satisfaction of seeing it unfold, but you don't need to. The judge of all the earth does not need your eyes to carry out his verdict. He needs your trust. This is what separates divine justice from human justice. Human justice needs witnesses. God's justice needs only truth, and that truth cannot be buried forever. It may be delayed, it may unfold quietly, it may happen in ways that bypass the world's attention altogether, but it will come. And when it does, it will not miss a mark. So if you're waiting for public vindication, take heart in knowing that heaven's record is not based on perception, but reality. You are seen, you are known, and the wrong that was done to you has not been erased just because the world forgot. God remembers, but more than that, God responds. In his way, in his time, with his wisdom. It may not make headlines, but it will make things right. What they did may never be shouted from the stage, but it will be judged from the throne, and the throne is a far higher place.